Today, on Meet the Author, we have a fascinating book to discuss. We will be talking about the evolution of fashion in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to now, and the emotional impact of AIDS, the paper mill playhouse, and the culture of the day. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend and author of this book, John Matarazzo. John, it is so nice of you to be here today at the HTTV studio.
Thank you, Paula. And I must say I want to thank you for being a part of having me here today. It's, I think you will find the book very exciting.
Well, I've read the book twice, John, and first of all, I want to ask you, how did you come up with this title, Beyond the Fitting Room?
Well, I wanted to say something a little different about the book. I wanted to talk about what happens when a customer leaves the fitting room, and what happens, what goes on beyond that fitting room, and who she converses with, and what her feeling is. And I think
I love the title, John.
Good.
I love the title. I love the cover, but I would like to tell the audience today, some quotes about John, which I found very interesting about him, and he's a very modest man. It's in the book. A man to be in awe of, cutting edge, a man ahead of his time, a tour de force, inspired mind of an extraordinary man. John, the intro of this book was written by Princess Amanda Borghese. She is quite impressed with you, and so am I. You were way ahead of your time in the 60s when you developed the concept of opening up a special store for ladies to shop, JALM, J-A-L-M. Tell us about how you began your life in the industry of marketing and retail. How'd you get started, John?
Well, I personally I was in retailing for a long time, all through college and high school, etc. And I always had a feeling about doing something special in retailing, something that was not being done. And I thought about it quite a while, and I said, well, I just don't want to be another store. Mm-hmm. We have to do something that's different. I had some partners at the time, and I just thought it out, what would make us a little bit more interesting than a regular store.
And when you opened up JALM in Short Hills,
yes,
in New Jersey, you had this concept that it was going to be more than a store to purchase clothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, I had an accountant and I had a lawyer, and they were always against me because every time I wanted to do something, they would say, sell another dress or another handbag and forget about it. But little did I know, regardless of what they told me, I was going to do what I wanted to do. And in constructing the store in 1963, I took one area and I did a glass enclosed room. And because they kept telling me no. And in that glass enclosed room was the tea room. And they didn't understand the concept because it was way behind, before the department stores that did these big restaurants.
Yeah, and I have to tell our viewers, it was way before the days of Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein,
absolutely,
and what have you. And the store that you had, which I shopped because I loved it also, was a beauty salon.
Exactly.
It was a couture clothing.
Absolutely.
It was a tea parlor. It was the place to be for impeccable clothing.
Exactly. We also did some design work. We had an in-house designers that did some designing for customers who wanted something very special.
And in your prime, how many employees did you have?
In total, 110. 70 in the beauty salon, and the rest was in the store. And that included salespeople, etc.
Now, as I recall, there was one day when you had black cars lined up,
Oh,
stretch,
yes.
big
Yes.
limousines.
Exactly.
How many?
There were 7 chauffeur-driven limousines, and I was called out to look and see. And I was told by someone kind of important. It was husband of one of the women that shopped in the store, and he just kept staring out there, and he said to me, "Look, do you see what I see?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "There's 7 chauffeur-driven limousines, but it does happen often." So he said, kept shaking his head, and he said, "You know what, John? You should write a book sometime about this."
Because that was an extraordinary feat for that day, because it was in the 60s.
That's right.
And tell the audience who you help create a lot of careers in the industry. You helped models get started. You helped authors get started. You helped the gentleman we see now a lot selling fur coats, who was an employee, who is
Dennis
Basso. So he started there, and he went on to make a big name for himself in the industry. I also found it quite interesting, John. You know, the culture has changed, and things that we hear about today that are acceptable, in the 1960s, it was not acceptable.
No.
And you really were way ahead of your time. You created a niche for gals of color to
Yes,
model.
absolutely.
Tell us something about that.
Even though in Paris and in Milano, Italy, it was an accepted thing for Black American female models on a runway. But when it came to Milburn Short Hills, let's put it that way, it was not accepted. And I remember we used to do about 20 fashion shows a year. So one particular show by a very named store, they were booked, they were paying for the show, but they came to me, about 20 of the women from the organization, and said, "You know, John, we love you, we love the clothes, we love everything, but we can't have this." So I said, "What do you mean you can't have this?" Of course. What is wrong with you? I tried to explain the whole.
Yes.
So they said, "No, we can't have it." So I said, "Oh, what do you want me to do?" They said, "Well, it's up to you. If you take them out of the show, we'll keep you going with the show." But I said, "No, I will not do that. No way will I stop. It's up to you at this point."
And you didn't stop, did you?
You
held your ground.
I held my ground, and I said, "It's up to you to make a decision." Well, the following day they came in, and they were sort of in tears, and they said, "We made a mistake. We want you to do the show."
And not only that, John, but at that time, AIDS was just coming out of
that was another situation
in the papers.
What?
And you had a specific employee. Tell us the story about this employee who you liked and who was there. He came to you one day in your office and said, "John, I have to talk to you."
Exactly. He was in tears. And I said to him, what is wrong? You know, I knew what the situation was going to be, how it was progressing.
Right, the disease.
With AIDS. So I said to him, "What is wrong?" So he said, "Well, you know, I'm so happy. I'm so successful in my career. I have a big following. I met someone that I'm very fond of and has become part of my life. And now, and he started crying, sobbing. I said, well, so what do you mean by now? He said, well, now it's over. And I didn't want to tell you because I thought you would let me go. And I said, in no way am I going to let you go. If the customers want to go, that's their...
And then if I gathered a few people found out that this man had AIDS.
Yes.
And they came to you. A group of ladies
Yes.
came to you.
I remember exactly. It was a Saturday morning, and there were 21 women that came. And they were there, and they were very nice about it, but they said, but we're not going to have you do the show. I said, fine. We'll return your check, and that's your
No,
decision.
they didn't want you. They wanted you to fire him.
Yeah, but they came to me and they said, we don't want him or anybody like that touching our head, so we're not going to have you do the show. I said, that's fine. That's your decision to make. But again, they came back and they said, we made a decision.
And they stayed as your clients.
And they all stayed, and the show went on.
And so here you are, a man of conviction.
Absolutely.
And you stood your
That's what
ground.
made it so special. You know, I didn't want to change some of the things that I felt so strongly about that were an important factor in this time period.
Tell us about the person you hired, Sherry. Tell us about Sherry, because that's awfully cute.
Well, Sherry came to me, she was very young, and I think I was quite naive. So I really didn't understand why Sherry was Harry.
Sherry was Harry. Now, this is the day before transgender and people coming out
way
with
before,
your sexuality.
Way before. Nobody understood it, and I was a little, myself, naive about the whole thing.
Of course, we all were.
But she turned out to be one of our best employees, and she was a drag queen, and she
performed in Greenwich Village and in the theaters.
All over the country. Mm-hmm. And then she also she worked for us as an assistant in the salon. And to be honest with you, the customers loved her. She knew everything about the theater.
She had quite a personality.
And quite a personality.
Yeah.
So I felt that I had something to give her so that she could be part of the real world.
Mm-hmm. John, I know that you handle any challenge that was thrown to you, and you also had the challenge of dressing these ladies. Who were your clients, the type of lady that was so demanding?
Well, there actually, when I write about women of style, there were 4 women. Mention the names.
Well, if you want to mention their names,
yeah, there
sure.
were 4 women. One was Marie Villani, who was councilwoman of Newark, mm-hmm. in a very macho city, mm-hmm. very feminine, blonde woman, a dear friend, and I can almost write a book about her. Then there was Ruth Cohn, who was a Lana Turner look-alike.
Yes, her picture is in the book. Lots of pictures in the book, I might add.
Yes, and she was the type that she didn't want a label on her clothes. She said, let my friends wear a label. I just want something for that new young designer.
And I might, I have to interject, that you did something extraordinary. You wanted to help new young designers, and you placed an ad in the
Yes.
New York Times. What did that ad say?
The ad said that, you know, new store in Short Hills, looking for some unusual, talented designers for things that are different, a little different than 7th Avenue. So I got a nice response. So as a result, I had one young girl call me, and she said, I read your ad, but I'm very young, and this was like 35 years ago, and she said, I don't have a car, and I don't know how I would get there. So I said, well, take the train. I didn't know who I was talking to. I said, take the train, I'll pick you up at the station. And she said, oh, great, I'll bring some clothes. Little did I know this young little girl schlepping these clothes over her arm came out to Milburn. I picked her up at the train station, and we had a nice relationship. We sold some of her clothes.
And I have to say that John just showed me that same gal who he's talking about was just in the New York Times 2 weeks ago, and her name is
Anna Sui.
It's Anna Sui. So it's interesting how you just took it upon yourself and said, hey, you know, I want to
Give her
do
a chance.
something new, something innovative.
Exactly.
A home for people to explore their talents and creativity. You know, I would be terribly remiss if I didn't mention your association with the Paper Mill Playhouse.
Oh.
The Paper Mill Playhouse is in our backyard, and tell me about the actresses you met and how you dressed them, John.
Many, many, many actresses. And Angela De Rossi would call me and say, John, we're doing a special show. For instance, Sondheim by Sondheim and Judy Kay. And he said, I need 4 red gowns, and 4 boas dyed the same color of the gowns. He said, you're the only person I know that can do it. So I said, when do you need it? He said, you know, within a day. Anyhow, I did it for him, and that was the beginning of me doing a lot of things for different movie stars. Ann Miller.
Ann Miller was at the Playhouse.
Christine Ebersole, Rebecca Luker. The names just go on. And I became
Connie Francis.
Connie Francis.
Whom you knew.
So I became very friendly. And not only for the shows, I became friendly with some of these stars as time went on. Also designing some clothes for them.
John, you had the store for how many years?
Well, still have it, you know.
Well, you still, yes,
Yeah.
but the
big
John,
store,
the boutique,
the big store
was
was about 23 years.
Yes. You had a personal life also, and you had a black tie life. You were into the theater and going out and what have you. You implied in the book that you had one opportunity to take over your store. Tell us about that. Who wanted to buy you?
Well, I had several when I had built the business up to a certain peak. I had certain big companies from New York. They came to me with an offer, and
that had to be intimidating.
Well, when it came to, I can mention Sullivan and Lots because we were the biggest in beauty under Saks Fifth Avenue at that time. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting because they pulled me out of my business, and I worked with the Kenneth in New York, mm-hmm. and they were just very interested.
They loved your concept.
They loved everything.
Loved the store.
They said
they loved it from. A lady could spend a day at
yes,
your store.
Don't change anything. Leave everything the way it is. And I spent a couple of weeks in New York, and then I had to make a decision because most of the help were leaving. And a big mistake that I made because I should have let them leave because they were interested in having me. They said, don't worry, you can replace everybody, but we want the place the way it is. So that's what happened. So I ripped up the check.
So you had this opportunity that might have changed your whole life.
Absolutely.
But you wanted to stay true to your conviction.
Exactly.
And your personal life.
Exactly.
And you decided to pass over the big bucks.
Yeah.
To stay where you are and care. And John, I know you, and I know how caring you are, and you have not only you have relationships with your clients.
Absolutely.
They've become your friends.
Absolutely.
So the collection of these high-class ladies were friends.
Absolutely.
And you dressed them.
Absolutely.
And you partied with them.
Exactly.
What an incredible period. it's hard to think that this was the day. We think of, Jackie Kennedy, the pillbox hat, the style, the clothing. Clothing today, people don't dress like they did in the 60s or 70s. How does that make you feel, John?
Well, it's sort of sad in a way, because women looked like women, and they had a certain concept about dressing. And I mean, today, if you mention the word ensemble, they don't know. Or you mention millinery, they don't know what.
Hats.
And this wasn't so long ago, but this is what women wore: gloves and a little hat, and it was altogether different. But they liked dress. They liked. Well, don't forget, those were the women who went to lunch, and that all changed.
Do you know, that's an interesting part, and you mentioned that in the book. That changed when careers changed, when gals went back to work. Gone were the ladies who stayed home and lunched and played mahjong.
Absolutely. Absolutely, that all changed.
So the clothing that they wore then, I would assume, was suits and tailored, and they didn't have the time to shop anymore.
They worked in factories, and they did. They wore jeans, and
then jeans came in.
Well,
the attire of the day, jeans and T-shirts.
Exactly. And that is something that will live on, too.
Well, you have seen it all. You have seen it all. Have you any thoughts about times that were comical or very interesting or very funny?
Yes. There were a few things that were very funny. One thing I'll never forget was one night I was closing the store, and I heard this woman calling, and she locked herself into the ladies' room. And I walked over and I said, "Mrs. So-and-so," I said, what are you doing? Oh, she was screaming, crying. She said, "I'm taking pills." She said, "My husband is CEO of this big corporation. I have to be there. I'm at the head table, and there's nobody here to take care of me for my hair." I said, "Well, unfortunately, they're all gone." Oh, and she started. She said, "Well," I said, "let me make a few phone calls." So I called one of my partners and I said, "Lillian, what do I do? She's crying, she's taking pills, I don't know what she's taking." I said, "But..."
It sounds as if she was having a little crisis over there, like a meltdown, John.
Absolutely. So I said, "What am I going to do?" She said, "John, I know you. Do it."
Her hair.
Yes, get the wig, and I'll tell you what to do. Hold on to the phone. So I can't do it. She said, "Yes, you can. I know you can." So I went, I got the wig, because this woman's still crying in the background, and what am I going to do with her? So I put the wig on her head. She said, "Now brush it a little and do this, put some spray, boom, boom, boom." I said, "Oh, this is terrible, Lillian." She said, "No, do it." So I did it.
And she walked away a happy woman.
She walked away happy. And the funny part of the whole thing, the following week, she called the salon and she said, "I want an appointment with John this week."
That was funny.
Oh, funny.
She loved your work.
Oh.
And you weren't even a hairdresser.
No, never.
Wow. Incredible stories. I'm sure you have lots of those type of stories. Now let's get very serious, John. Is the party over? Is it over? Is the party over? The styles of today.
No matter what's happened, most people, and they do think that the party's over, but truly it's not. I think women have to take hold of themselves, and they have to start doing things with themselves, whether it be their makeup, their hair, their clothes, to a degree. And I think they have to, getting out again, instead of saying, I don't go, I don't do, start doing. And I'm thinking, to put a little more fun in their life, start dancing.
Oh, well, that could be another show. I love dancing, John. But the lifestyle we have today is less, it's casual. It's more casual. People aren't dressing to go to the theater.
No.
Or listen, I could talk to you about like supper clubs when friends had gone to see a play and they went to a supper club or for drinks afterwards. it was a lifestyle. It was an ambiance. It was the total package. I hope that total package isn't gone anymore and that we still have some...
I think it could happen, but it will change.
And it's up to the young people to change it?
To a degree, yes. And I think it will happen. I see it today. I see where they're moving a little bit more, the young, but you still have that feeling that they want to be just so casual, and that's it.
Well, it's not the 60s, 70s, or 80s anymore, and
No.
so we certainly, as we've talked about in the book, the culture, the norms, the topics in conversation that were taboo, it's all out there now.
That's right.
John, I thought it was a fascinating read.
Thank you.
If people want to buy this book, or if they want to meet you, you are still selling today. Your beautiful clothes can be purchased at Zoma. It's
Yes, in Short Hills.
In Short Hills, Zoma. How do you? That's
Xoma.
XOMA in Short Hills. And if someone wants to read your book, they could purchase it at
Barnes & Noble, Amazon,
Barnes & Noble.
Google. I mean, it's all over, really.
And but it's a I like the back cover too. Having you dressed up in your tuxedo and your two dogs.
Right.
You've had a very interesting life, John Matarazzo, and it should continue, and you should continue to dress ladies, because I know your taste is impeccable.
Thank
and I
you.
want to thank you for being here today.
Thank
And
you.
I
Thank you
hope
so much.
everyone enjoyed this show of Meet the Author. Thank you, John.
Thank you.